Well, welcome again to our YouTube channel and broadcast. We are going through the Gospel of Mark as we continue through the New Testament, and I just love the Gospel of Mark. It just moves so quickly. So if you're with us today, we are in Mark chapter 1, verse 29. Now we're going to talk about the compassion of Jesus. And the word compassion really comes from two Latin words. It means to suffer with. But Webster's defines it as a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress, together with a desire to alleviate it. Clearly, this characteristic is marked, really, the ministry of Jesus. And Mark, the gospel writer, points this out probably more than any other gospel writer. We see Jesus doing acts of compassion, constantly serving, giving himself, pouring himself out. Now, Jesus told us that if we're going to follow him, we need to deny ourselves and look out for others, really take up our cross, follow him. But we see in Jesus just such a willingness to spend himself for the people that he loved. He preached to others, but even more important, he exemplified what he preached through his actions. Now, it was the Sabbath day, and Jesus had been preaching, actually, teaching in the synagogue. And while he was doing that, a demon-possessed man called out, saying to Jesus, "Holy One of God." And so Jesus silenced the demon, cast him out, and people, no doubt, were like, wow, we've never seen this happen before in a synagogue. And so Jesus left, and we pick it up now in verse 29 of Mark chapter 1. Now, as soon as they had come out of the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she served them. So as soon as they entered the house of Peter and Andrew, they're brothers, they live together. Peter's married, and his mother-in-law was sick, and so they told Jesus. Jesus goes back in there, sees her, touches her, lifts her up, and suddenly the fever goes away. And so what does she do? She gets up and she starts serving them, And I love the fact that Jesus almost like couldn't help himself, there's a need. I've got to go, take care of her. But we see that Jesus had compassion on the multitudes, that he would heal lots of people. But you know what? He cared about individuals too. And we need to remember that. A lot of time that Jesus just spent with people was just one-on-one with individuals. And so, he touched her. She got better, and the most natural thing to do at that point is just serve the Lord out of gratitude, and that's really what she did. Verse 32. At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. When he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. So according to rabbinical tradition, Sabbath passed when 3 stars could be seen in the twilight sky. Then it was the new day, because the Jewish new day begins at that time, at sunset. And so now all the people, hearing what Jesus had done in the synagogue, they brought all of their people out that were sick, who were demon-possessed, and, they brought them out because now they could carry a load. Before the Sabbath was done, they couldn't carry a load. Now they could carry all the people to Jesus, and all the people from Capernaum came to the house of Peter. So what did Jesus do? This is the end of a long day, and he received them, and he healed them, and he cast out many demons, laboring well into the night. Now, I think after such an exhausting day, most of us would probably have just been looking forward to getting to bed, getting a good night's sleep, maybe sleeping in the next day, but not Jesus. Verse 35, now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. It is interesting that even though, it had been a really long day, and no doubt Jesus was exhausted, he would get weary like the rest of us, but he still got up way before sunlight, way before dawn, went out to a solitary place to pray. Now, why did he do that? Well, obviously he knew he needed the Father's help, and he needed wisdom from the Father. He needed to know what it was that God wanted him to do next. And this is just what I love about Jesus. Even though he was the Son of God, he still knew that he needed to pray. And if Jesus needed to pray and receive strength from the Father, then how much more do we need to? And yet it's so easy for us to make excuses. Like, I can't have my devotional today. It's, I overslept, whatever. But Jesus really made that a priority in his life. He considered it essential to have time alone with the Father. He could not give out to others without also receiving from the Lord, from the Father, his Father. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." But he said to them, "Let us go into the next towns, that I may preach there also, because for this purpose I have come forth." So, Peter wakes up, where's Jesus? He's gone, he's missing, and so they go searching, they find him, and by this point, people are already coming, bringing more of their needs to Jesus, because, Jesus is compassionate, and they want him to meet their needs. And so Jesus said, no, you know what? We have to move on. And yet here he was having a successful ministry there in Capernaum. He could have just, started a great church, but he knew from spending time with the Father that he needed to move on to the lost sheep of Israel. This is why he came, was to minister to the lost sheep of Israel. Now, the people did not understand that the authority that Jesus had received to heal people, to cast out demons, the main reason for this, clearly God cares about people, but he also wanted to demonstrate that Jesus was the Son of God. And this would be what people would get out of this. Nicodemus would later say, hey, we have seen all the things you do, and it must be that God is with you, because nobody could do these things unless God were with him. And so, but other cities needed to see this. The gospel needed to be preached in other cities. He came to bring the good news to all of the lost sheep of Israel. God was moving. Jesus was very popular, but he would not forsake the unreached. And we need to remember that whenever God blesses a ministry, that's a good thing. But it's easy for us to get so in love with God's people that we can become, keepers of the aquarium rather than fishers of men. We need to remember God has called us to go into all the world and reach those who have not been reached with the good news of Jesus Christ. And I think that's always difficult to overcome, sort of just our desire for comfort, because it can be difficult to press outward, but clearly that is the Lord's heart. He told his disciples that the fields are white for harvest. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. He told us to go into all the world and preach the gospel. And we can't just let ourselves become so comfortable that we neglect to do this. Verse 39. He was preaching in their synagogues throughout all Galilee and casting out demons. Now, a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him, and saying to him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Now, leprosy was an insidious and incurable disease that left a person isolated, unclean, and devoid of all human contact. They had to completely isolate themselves. Leviticus 13 gave the instructions for the leper. Leviticus 13:45, the leprous person who has the disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head hang loose, and shall cover his upper lip and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Imagine that. Imagine being completely isolated for years, for the rest of your life. And that's what it was like to be a leper. Now, leprosy is known today as Hansen's disease. It starts out on the skin as a white, shiny spot, but gradually it would spread, bleaching the hair white and forming white, crusty scales all over your skin. But then it would break into terrible sores that would be swelling, and then the disease would go inwardly, attacking the inward organs and the bones, down to the bones. First, it would start with the appendages, but finally go to the vital organs, resulting in a long, slow, miserable death. It also left one with a nauseating stench. So those who had the disease were separated from all society, living in their own colonies, and that's where this man would have been. He would be violating the commandment to even approach Jesus. But he had heard the stories about Jesus, and he thought, this is my only hope. And he believed that if Jesus were willing, that he could be cleansed. It's interesting. The leper was, people who had diseases were healed, but people who had leprosy were cleansed. And that was the whole thing. He came to Jesus and said, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And I think that's the crux of the issue as we approach God. It's not that we don't believe God can do it. Most of us, we believe God can do anything. He can heal us, but is he willing? And we wonder, are you really willing, God? And, being a father helps me to have a lot more confidence in the willingness of God, because, when my kids come to me and they have a legitimate request, it's not evil, it's good. I want to meet that need, and I think if I can do that, how much more does our Father in heaven want to meet our needs? Not always on our time schedule, not always in our way, but in a way that speaks of his love. Verse 41, then Jesus, moved with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him and said, I am willing, be cleansed. And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Now, I wonder, as Jesus was just reaching his hand out, if the disciples were like, what are you doing, Jesus? If you touch him, you'll be unclean, and Jesus didn't seem to care, because as soon as he touched him, the guy was not unclean anymore. Now he was